Hello, world. Welcome to Soulfire Spirit Stories. I'm Andréa Kohalmi Summers, and today we've got a really exciting episode. This particular topic that we're about to discuss today is something that has been prevalent personally, professionally, but especially in the corporate space. I've been doing communications for a couple decades, and whether it's with executives or employees, employee engagement, just the human potential seems to be limited by fear, and the fear that we place on ourselves, what we're conditioned with, what we bring into the world around us, as well as perception versus reality and the people around us who shape our experience every day. So on this important topic today, and with me is a very special guest and friend, Theo Kyriakos, and he is a transpersonal therapist. So he's got some interesting ideas to share with us in dialogue, and I'm going to bring him in right now. Welcome, Theo.
Hello. Hi.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
And we're fine on the live stream. I just checked it.
Thank you. Speaking of fear and things not going right, yes. To dive in right away, this concept of perception and reality, you and I have talked a bunch of times. And over the past year, especially, the topic of fear keeps coming up in many different spaces for people. And one of the things just personally that I wanted to share is I've had cross-country moves a couple times, and people have always told me, they're like, well, you're so courageous in what you do. What they don't see, so the perception is that I'm courageous. The reality is terror in going through changes, significant changes for family, for career, just the moves themselves. Even 15 minutes ago, I was standing on a chair, unscrewing light bulbs to make sure the lighting would be good for our conversation today and not distracting. So fear pops up in a variety of ways for people, but I'd love to hear your perspective. What have you seen, and what would you like to talk about today?
Okay, so, as I said to you, it will be nice to have it as a conversation. Mm-hmm. But, from what you already said, like you mentioned change. So mm-hmm. Often when we have a big change in our lives, or a change is coming either because we're choosing it, or it's a crisis, or, or circumstantial, whatever it is. Usually, if the bigger the change, the bigger the chance that we have to deal with some level of fear. So, the way I'm looking at things right now, it looks that, and everything with what's happening the last couple of years, first of all, we see that there is a lot of fear spread in different ways and in different levels. Like a lot of people are frightened, and with good reason. And the good reason I'm going to explain later. And and also, if we look at the situation, it's almost like we ask for a paradigm shift. It's like changing even our value systems. Like a lot of people during the lockdown, I work with clients all over the world because I do sessions online. So I could hear things from different countries, not just from the country I'm right now. So they're talking about what's the point, and I want my freedom, and different, like they're reevaluating systems that they're a part of, that they have been long-standing for a long time. Mm-hmm. Because the truth of the matter is, a lot of the way we are taught to evaluate ourselves, our lives, others, has to do with the mentality that is not sustainable. Like, it's not sustainable in a personal level. Mm-hmm. It's not sustainable in a collective level, and it's not sustainable in a planetary level. And the deeper, like the more, the deeper the belief system is, like the more well-established it is, the more difficult it is to recognize it, because it's like, no, of course, that's why we're here, like to produce and consume, to make more and consume more, and then I'll be happy. Like we have attached our perception of who we are, happiness, and a lot of other spiritual higher values around a system that is sick, basically. And it's sick because it cannot be maintained for too long, you know? So it's interesting that a lot of people are questioning very basic beliefs during these 2 years now. And more people are asking, you know, what's the purpose? What's the meaning? What are we doing, you know? We come in touch with, a lot of people came in touch with what happens, like, who do we, like, I'm talking about ourselves, like we have to face ourselves when we are not at work, when we are confined in a space, sometimes with family, sometimes alone. Both have their challenges because it's not, oh, I have company, but yeah, but when you're 24/7 in a house, then all the issues come more into the surface. When you're alone and you don't have contact, then again, all the issues will come on the surface. So sometimes we see that as well, like we follow different paths, but what we are working with is similar. Like the person that is alone and the person that is in the family, they still have to face the shadow in a different perspective. So you also mentioned perception of reality. So something like we can separate reality in different realms, let's say, but let's say we'll keep two realms this conversation, which is the inner realm, what's happening within us, what we think, what we believe, how we translate the things we see, and what's happening outside us. Sometimes there's a dissonance between the two. And like I'll talk a little bit about cognitive dissonance and cognitive bias, which is a very important concept for perception. And it's an important concept because, for example, I was reading a book of Carl Sagan, which I really respect as a scientist, and it's a demon-infested world. And he talks about how we're losing touch with the, facts and science and how to process facts and science. And I noticed and it's a very good book, but I noticed in some examples that he's giving in the book, he falls into the same mistakes that he warns about. And this is a very smart person. This is a person that really has studied the scientific method of, he's logical, he has good skepticism, he can process information in a high degree, and still he falls into the same, and not in a big way, but in some of the examples he gave, he falls into the same mistakes that he warns about. He's reading in a book that is quite thick. And the reason was because the psychological bit was missing, which is about the cognitive bias. In the whole book, that's the only part that is missing, like a really in-depth analysis in the cognitive bias and cognitive dissonance. Because that has to do with emotional states as well. Not only, but we're talking about fear today, and I'm going to talk about the emotion. Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Yeah, we had an interruption, so I stopped talking when I saw the feed going down.
That's okay. Before you keep going, can you define cognitive dissonance and cognitive bias?
Yes. So I'm going to talk about cognitive bias first. Cognitive bias is when let's say the objective information that is coming from outside inward is subjectively interpreted, and we create in a different reality, a subjective reality with the objective information we're receiving. Now, this has many steps because also we need to check how objective is the information we're receiving. So, it has many levels, but let's keep it for the cognitive bias definition. So we're receiving an information, and because of our belief systems, because of our conditioning, how we grew up, under what culture, what belief system, religion, political system beliefs, whatever beliefs we have, and also unprocessed emotions, fear, guilt, shame, pain, whatever the unprocessed emotions are, will shift the way we process the information. And although let's say we get in some objective information, the way we will create our reality with this information, that the perception we're going to create around the information, is going to be slightly or a lot tinged by everything that's going on in the inner world. So there is a mirror in between the inner and the outer, but they also have different rules and different facts. So, the outer fact can be, I don't know, XYZ information that is coming in. The inner fact is I have been through a lot of pain and I have learned to trust X but not Y, and Z I don't know about. It's actually scaring me a bit. So the inner process is like the X information that, let's say, it's objective for the argument's sake, that we receive, and I will accept. The Y information that it's information that I have been heard from before, stuff like that, I may reject. Mm-hmm. And the Z that I don't know about, I may even delete from my perception. So it's very interesting. I mean, I don't know if I'm clear enough. If I'm not, just tell me, So there are fixes for that, but in order to really, we can teach ourselves to have mechanisms, like learn logic, because you can actually learn logic. They used to teach it at schools, but now it's not a lesson anymore. At least in Greece, at some point, I know my mother was taught logic in school, or skepticism, or philosophical argumentation, learning to uncondition ourselves from basic conditions. Well, like a basic condition we have since very young, which is useful when we're a child, is to obey authority. Mm-hmm. Like it's not like a big conspiracy, although if you go into the school system that was created from the Industrial Revolution, there was some interest why they wanted the kids to grow up as adults, that they know a certain system, to sit in a desk, to work from 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, and then take homework and get graded. Grading may become salary when you grow up. I don't know, it can be something else. Mm-hmm. So, but also, it's a kid needs to obey a little bit the parent, because if it's not obeying the parents, it's in danger. So it's a built-in system too. But when we grow up, if we never turn around and question the beliefs we have about who we obey, why we obey them, is it logical to obey them? Is it not? And then on top of that is all the unprocessed emotions, which are very powerful. The more unconscious an emotion is, the more our cognitive bias will play, like it will be augmented. Mm-hmm. Because a fear that we know, we can have a little bit in check, not 100%. Like if we still haven't processed it. If fear is unknown, then we think we're completely free when we react to trying to avoid our fear. We think we are acting out of our own personal freedom, but we're not. And the unconscious it's not like, no, I don't have any fear. That can be that is not an indication that you don't have a fear, because unconscious means in the dark. That's why in-depth psychotherapy has tools, and Jung cultivated a lot of tools, but working with the body, working with imagination, with creative expression, as tricks to access information that they are not in the visible spectrum of our awareness. They're not in the light, they're in the dark. The dark is not the evil, although dark can appear as evil, but it's not the same thing. In our imagination to appear as evil, I mean. So anyway, fear that is unprocessed, or fear in a deeper level that is here, that you don't see even, can act like an invisible puppeteer in our actions. Mm-hmm. And then we act, and when it's visible, you say, yeah, I acted, I didn't want to, but I was afraid. So there you know that your fear is controlling you. You're not a free person. And it's not a judgment in whatever I say. I'm just describing mechanics, because I have been afraid too. I have made choice out of fear. So I'm not judging anybody. I'm not to talk from a higher stance. I'm just describing like an engineer will describe an engine and how it runs, And then the fear that is unconscious, you say, no, you don't even acknowledge that you acted out of fear. No, I was free. It was my choice. It was my choice. But then you can get upset with people that have different choices. And that's an indication sometimes. You can get blinded to information, like we talked about confirmation bias, but it's also cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is when, let's say, because we're talking about fear, I'm limiting the examples around fear, but we can talk about many different things in the same language. You can change fear with guilt or shame, or just fear is like a really more basic emotion. The more basic it is, the more it can include, like guilt has fear, and anxiety has fear. So cognitive dissonance is like, I have a belief system, and since we're talking about fear, I choose to believe something, either a longer standing belief system or something on this period that something scary is happening. So I do my best to choose something, to believe in something that will make me feel safe, because I cannot process the fear. So when I choose that belief, I kind of relax a little bit the fear. I haven't processed the fear. I just relax it a little bit because I chose something to believe, right or wrong. I'm not examining that. That will ease my fear. And then information comes that challenges this belief. So we have a dissonance now. The information, objective information that is coming, and what the belief I chose to use, and not consciously necessarily, sometimes consciously, unconsciously, to make me feel safe. So that's the dissonance. And the dissonance is the attempt to eliminate to bring homeostasis, to bring balance again. So it will either reject the belief, or you can do different tricks. You can do a generalization. Like in Nazi Germany, it's like the Jews were sick and they were going to infect us and they were subhumans. You do a generalization instead of actually examining the information if it's right, what they're telling you, And then you create an enemy that is a threat to you, something you can touch, you can feel, you can attack. We saw it with COVID as well. Like we have the vaccinated versus unvaccinated. So if someone wants to control you, they can use language. The first thing they need to do is create a problem or use a problem that is existing. You don't have to create a problem. You can use an existing problem. You can amplify it with language to frighten people. And then you can separate people, because that will create a conflict between the two groups and will keep the fear and the anger high. Now, in hypnosis, in order to make someone very suggestible to instructions, you have to increase affect. And fear and anger is really good emotions that you can rise. So if you're trying to see if someone is trying to manipulate you, can listen to the language. Someone can give you information about the dangerous things without scaring you, or someone can give you information about the thing by scaring you. Fear mongering, and then you lose the ability to actually process information in a factual, objective way, to research information, to look further. It's like, and you can use different, like you have the generalizations of, these guys are conspiracy theorists, or the other ones are vaccinated versus unvaccinated. So you create when you generalize a group, you're unwilling, it's like if you present arguments to someone, right or wrong, I'm not examining, and the other person says, oh, don't be stupid, just do what I do, or don't do what I do, whatever. Mm-hmm. That person cannot process information. He's already in fear, even if he doesn't look frightened at that moment, even if he's very calm, or if he's angry, not frightened. It's fear. Like if they cannot have a conversation and they cannot process the information, say, look, actually, that's why the cancel culture is very dangerous. If two scientists that are well established disagree, they need to have a conversation. You cannot erase the one and just have the one, And I'm not talking about, like, let's say I mentioned the two groups because it's relevant, like vaccinated and unvaccinated. You'll see the same thing I'm describing in either of the extremes. Like if a person is unvaccinated and very scared, the person is vaccinated, I'm not checking if it's good to vaccinate or unvaccinate. I'm not interested in that conversation right now. But what I'm interested in is to understand that the people that in the extremes that are very angry with the other side, are in fear.
Mm-hmm. I actually, along those lines, just to interject, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but I want to add in that how this shows up in business as well. Like you're bringing in real world application globally. This is a conversation that's happening every day, though. People are also experiencing fear and control, and there are different ways that people are communicating, and then the experience that it creates for the person inside. So there were a couple things when you were talking about cognitive dissonance and bias, and then how people might react to certain things. I agree with you. Like fear is this basic emotion from which anger, frustration, and other things will bubble up, and it becomes a combination of things. But how fear is utilized at work, I'm using that word intentionally. If people listen to the words that are being used and how they are being communicated to, it creates a particular experience. And there are certain cultures that are defined as toxic cultures because there is a lack of communication, lack of transparency, or fear mongering flat out because they want to quash people for whatever the reason is. There's always a reason, but people, I've never heard any executive or any leader say, like, I want to frighten my people. It's unconscious in the way they're reacting or treating people, but it creates an effect, which you touched on earlier, that effect. What I want to capture too, because I know we're 22 minutes in and we've got so much to cover. We're going to have multiple episodes for this topic.
Yeah, we will.
But something that comes up when I do energy work with my clients, or in the space of meditation, is bringing awareness to the effect on your body and what fear does to people and how it affects, and then how it manifests from there in terms of illness. So it's not just the conscious, unconscious mental state of how someone is affected, but it can lead to stress. It can lead to additional pain that is carried. And unless someone is aware of how that feels physically, you carry it. And then if you're in chronic pain all the time, you are also then acting and speaking from that pain. It just creates this cycle of fear.
Yes,
so
yes.
The purpose of what we're talking about today is really to get to this awareness. So you're taking us on this journey, explaining the different facets of fear and how it might pop up for people in their lives, but ultimately the evolution from it and how we move forward from this state of being. But it requires awareness of fear, perception, reality, control, and how it can be there. So you're offering us great food for thought. So I'm sorry for interjecting, but I wanted to add in and make it real for business too. Like this is every day, all around.
There are many kind of biases. Like in business, that you can also find like it can be a cognitive bias out of fear because they're afraid. They want the higher management, for example, is afraid that it's not going to meet its quota, or it has the owner above them pressuring them, and it trickles down. It can be a self-serving bias. There are many kind of distinction of bias. A self-serving bias, it's self-evident what it means. If someone is biased because that serves them, whatever that means. Like it kind of. You have also like empathy is being cut down in these cases, because you're so caught up in your so self-serving bias is more egoistic, but all of them you can trace back to fear, That's why I chose fear a lot. And yeah, it's very interesting. There's affinity bias. There's someone, that they cannot really process all this information. They can just choose a personality that is in the media or it's well known. And the affinity bias is like, this guy, I feel safe. Whatever he says, he has my solution. So that I'm going to follow them. I don't care. If anybody tries to attack them, I will attack them back, because I don't want anybody to touch my idol or my God or my, the person that I'll trust to follow. But we're trained to do that. Like, we train to do that with teams. We train to do that with sexes sometimes, men versus women, this versus that. We train with politics. I say to people, because I have friends from all kind of parties, and not just in the US, but in Greece too. For me, it's about the person. It's not. But I say to them, you want to tell me that you're a citizen with a Greek word politis, like the responsible citizen. You have to tell me what the president you supporting did wrong, not just the things that he did well, and what the opposition leader, when they're in charge, does well, not just what they do wrong. So tell me what your president did wrong, or you don't agree with, whatever wrong. I'm just using the word now. And then tell me what the opposition also did right. And a lot of people cannot answer these questions. It's like, no, what Obama did wrong? Nothing. What Trump did wrong? Nothing. They can't answer the question. I said, are you serious? Like, just go. It's like, there's nobody perfect. You're going to find something big if you go in and check. So that's because of
go ahead,
fear
finish.
and bias,
Mm-hmm. It starts at childhood. And this is why I don't necessarily want to use the word unraveling, but maybe self-reflection on where we are today in our journey around fear. And instead of just blindly following, really trace back to the roots of when it started. And there is conditioning. You mentioned this early on today. But even as children, we're expected to behave a certain way. We have to sit still in school. We have to do something. We have to get graded on whatever that something is. Yes, it's part of a system, but we're indoctrinated into these systems. And it's such a part of multi-generational experience that very few people question why. And then those experiences that it leads to as we try to fit in to whatever the situation is, whatever group we're in, throughout school, when we become adults, in the community, it's led by fear because we want to fit in. Very few people are willing to stand up, speak out, but also be balanced to the point that you just made. It's the do your research, look at all angles, and speak from a place of knowledge, but also be open to discussion and dialogue. Otherwise, we're back in fear and control, that it's this way. It has to be this way. And then shows up in our families. It shows up at work. It shows up at school. Children do that all the time.
Yeah, of course. Because, once we move from that place, but let's say authority. It's very interesting. Like, if you, again, I put the children, because the child needs the authority, like needs the control. But it's different to teach the child healthy obedience in authority and slowly give him space to become his own authority, and teach him to do that, to obey the mom, not by imposing fear, maybe learning consequences, whatever, responsibility. All these are interesting, but not scared the child, for example, and then scare them even further, and then scare them even further, and then we create an adult that is it's basically obeying fear in their life, and knowing it or not knowing it. Like, the conversation, are we free? A lot of people will tell you we're free, other people will tell you we're not free, but it's a very complicated question to ask, because there's so many levels of conscious and unconscious material that we consider our truth, and it's not our truth. Like a believer in one of the religions, they consider what they taught true because it's written in a book. Very few have gone into the spirituality to really search what is it? Or, what is this God of theirs that believe, for example? Or, it's also, it can be believing or not believing in it. It doesn't matter, but rarely we question things. And we also are taught to polarize.
Mhm.
Polarize is insecurity. It's ego fear, it's ego insecurity. Can it be that all truths have part of something that is real and part that's something that is fictional? We have to be able to have the conversations.
Can you, because we're at time, essentially, we're
Yeah.
at 30 minutes. So to close this up, can you leave people with a thought, a question along these lines of self-reflection? What would you advise
You
someone?
answered. You answered the what you asking me to say. So you said
Say
it.
it again, but you say.
Self-reflection. Self-reflection. For me, look, all everything I have done in my life to understand myself, to work with other people, to work with myself in psychological level, in spiritual levels, in many different levels, it's all about creating awareness. So self-reflection is a good start. That's why mindfulness and meditation hasn't been eradicated from the planet after so many thousands of years. Of course, it's different to use mindfulness and meditation to focus on your breath, so you can relax the feeling. That's a different practice. A lot of people are teaching the basic functions of meditation as meditation, like teaching concentration and focus. It's just the first tools. And if you focus on the wall, which is white, you're going to feel a little bit better, but you haven't processed anything. If you're experiencing fear, anxiety, guilt, shame, like, you can feel better by focusing in something that takes your mind away from what is processing. Eventually, what you have to do with meditation and mindfulness is to go in, to face the demons, to face the deep. But okay, I'm not suggesting people to just go these techniques by themselves, especially if there is trauma involved. You need someone to help you out with these things. And there are many ways to do it. But it's not disengaging with what's coming up. It's finding ways to self-introspect. Maybe you need help at some point. That's why my profession was created as well, because sometimes we need someone to walk along, to hold space, because you can enter in a very, very scary place. But once you go through fear, not away from fear, if you make a decision out of fear, you're not going to avoid your fear. The fear will pop up. You saw it this year. Whoever made the decision based on fear, no matter what the decision was, the fear didn't leave them. Mm-hmm. It left them for an instance, and then it came back. So we need to go in, not out. But this takes training. It's training that usually we don't have in life. You need to work with the body. There are certain tools. But yes, the start is what you said. It's like deciding to turn within and say, and just look at the inner space and create more awareness what's happening within, so you can understand when you're acting or when you're reacting. And then we can share more tools as we go along. I mean, that's the basic one. For me, like, most of the times I'm frightened. I can deal with the belief system, what's happening with my belief, the cognitive behavioral stuff in psychotherapy. Then you can go to the emotional, we start engaging with the body and stuff like that. Eventually, you work with just the energy you feel, you call fear, pain, whatever. And then the deepest practices from the old traditions is go through an inner death. Other times it's bigger in so death meditations. But if you say to people death meditations, and they go away, go away, you're scary.
Before we can't end on that note. Please explain what that is, and then
death meditation is surrendering to your own death. But there are many different ways to do it. I'm not suggesting anybody to just go do something like that right now, because I don't know where each person is. But what I am suggesting is start looking within. Like, don't just go in and watch your breath in meditation. Go in and do a scan. See where the tension is in your body. The body will lead you. because everything we experience, we also feel in a sense in the body. Where we feel, we sense in the body. So if you find the location of the tightness, it can even be an injury sometimes, or like it's an old injury, whatever, you can sit there and just breathe there and observe, like cultivate observation, but now not just in your breath, but in a problematic place in your body. And that will open more doorways. Again, if there's trauma involved, you use like serious work, so you don't just go in and, oh, let's breathe into my pain, because it can explode. Mm-hmm. It needs pacing, it needs kindness, it needs different things.
I think that's a perfect way to end, so that our audience, if you need help and you would like to go into a deeper exploration, contact Theo. His contact information is here.
Or Theo, or someone like a Jungian therapist that is, you can work with. I work online, yes, I can. But, someone that is not afraid of fear, like it's not going to try to just make you feel better. It's just going to help you create more awareness around what you're experiencing. Not their awareness, like not tell you what your fear is, not tell you what to do, but tell you what to do in order to know your fear. You see what I'm saying? It's not someone that will tell you, oh, you're afraid of this, you have to do that and that and that. Yeah, it's like learn how to have conversations. It's like what I was saying between the scientists before. It's also between the aspects in us that they don't agree. So if we learn to dismiss things we don't agree with within ourselves, we also learn to dismiss the scientific conversation. It's not very different. Like once we learn to accept opposing views within ourselves, opposing energies within ourselves that ask to be integrated, because that's what they do. Like the opposite appear, not because they looks like they want to rule, like one wants to rule over the other, but they're acting out of fear. The more you have them in conversation within yourself, and for some people what I'm saying will make sense, for others it won't, but I'm talking about different feelings, let's say, different aspects of the self. The more you have them in conversation, you don't have to force the relationship, or I have to love my inner child. No, you don't have to do anything. You have to talk to it. That's the only thing you have to do. And as you talk to it, and the first time you talk to it, you remember how to tear it apart. Tear it apart. It's your imagination. Nobody will be harmed. Then bring them back in conversation. And again, and again. Every time you bring them back in conversation, you'll observe. But all this, you need to know the tools. How do you bring them in conversation? So you're going to observe a change, and these two suddenly will start coming together. So in alchemy, we're talking about the sacred marriage, when the opposite come together, and the offspring is the golden child. It's a higher position. That's why they're represented by gold, which is a higher metal, which includes both the left and the right, where the two that they were fighting, the good acts, the qualities of the left and the right. So they balance out a higher quality. They create a higher quality. Mm-hmm. But the higher quality is neither the one nor the other. So this is I just roughly described the sacred marriage in alchemy, So all this happens with conversation, like we converse with the different aspects of the self. We don't try to avoid. If you use a practice to avoid something, even if the highest meditation practice the guru taught you, you're going to create a split internally. If you use the practice to engage and understand, not to heal, clear, or whatever, love, forgive, or whatever, just to engage. Use the practice to engage. The practice will lead you somewhere. And the better the practice they give you, the better the way that it will lead you. So intention in the inner process is very important. Okay, here you go. Check your intentions when you go within to check something. Do it to engage, to learn, to connect, to converse, not to separate. Clear, heal. There are times for this too. There are times, but that's.
I think next time, or one of the times after, when we do this again, for you to maybe take us through what that looks like or feels like.
Oh, no.
In the meantime.
Okay, a little bit, because I don't want to take responsibility for people that, you can have, like you can have serious things.
I don't mean take it deep. No, I don't mean take it deep. We don't want to harm anybody. That's not what we're doing in these sessions. It's more giving people an understanding of what it is that you do or how certain things are done.
Yeah, yes. I mean, we have a few more things we can talk about around fear, and we can be a bit more specific on, I don't know. Yeah. on certain things, and then we can give some more practices maybe.
I would love that. And to close out, and thank you for everyone who's tuning in globally, because I know we've got people from
thank you,
California to Europe that are on right now. To close up something that you just said, whether you contact Theo or you contact a doctor or a therapist to guide you through a deeper exploration, have a conversation with the person first and make sure that it feels right to you. Because if you sign up for something that doesn't feel right off the bat, it's not going to be a productive or positive experience that will lead you to where you need to be. Yeah. So on that note, any closing thoughts, Theo?
No, I have a lot of thoughts. They're not closing, they're opening thoughts.
Hold them for next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Andrea,
for joining us,
setting up all this and the opportunity to have a conversation with you. And thanks everybody that joined. You can put comments, I think, on the YouTube video. So we're going to check the comments and maybe include some of your questions or your concerns in the next video.
Absolutely. So Theo, hang on for 1 second. Thank you for joining me today. And thank you everybody for tuning in. Till next time, have an amazing day.
Bye.